It's 3 in the morning, you're lying there, staring at the ceiling, and somewhere in the middle of that, a thought sneaks in. What if I just didn't sleep tonight? And then a stranger thought right behind it. What if I never slept again? What would actually happen? Now let's actually answer the question. What happens if you never sleep again? And I want to take you through this in real time. Because what's fascinating and honestly a little disturbing is how fast it happens, asterisk 17. You've been awake for most of a normal day plus a little more. At hour 17, your reaction time is equivalent to someone who is legally drunk. Not tired drunk, legally impaired drunk. A blood alcohol equivalent of around 0.05%. And the disturbing part isn't even the number. The disturbing part is that most people at hour 17 feel largely fine. They think they're functioning normally. They are not. Your brain has started lying to you. Sleep deprivation doesn't just impair you, it specifically impairs your ability to recognize that you're impaired. The part of your brain that would notice the problem is the first part to go offline 24. 1 full day without sleep. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic, decision-making's impulse control, is running on fumes. Your amygdala, the part that runs on emotion and threat detection, is still fully online. In fact, it's more reactive than usual. Without the prefrontal cortex doing its job, your amygdala is basically a car with no brakes. So at 24 hours, you don't just feel tired. Small inconveniences feel infuriating. Mild criticism feels devastating. You might cry at a commercial, or snap at someone you love and not totally understand why. This isn't weakness. This is just your brain without its filter. How many times in your life have you had a huge emotional reaction to something and thought, why am I like this? There's a decent chance some of those moments happened after a night of bad sleep. When you're running low on sleep, you're not running on a weaker version of yourself. You're running on a chemically altered version, scaring 36. Your cognitive performance has dropped significantly. Simple tasks take longer. Complex tasks become genuinely difficult. Your memory is glitchy. You'll have conversations and immediately not remember having them. Your pain tolerance drops. Your immune system, which does significant work during sleep, is starting to struggle. And then something harder to explain happens. Your sense of time goes slightly soft. Moments feel longer than they are, or shorter. The line between what just happened and what happened an hour ago starts to blur. 48. 2 full days. Almost nobody reaches this point accidentally. At 48 hours, cognitive impairment is severe. Not need another coffee severe. We're talking measurably close to being fully drunk in terms of performance and reaction time. Around this point, some people start experiencing microsleeps. Your brain, without your permission, without you even noticing, falls asleep for tiny fractions of a second, sometimes 2 seconds, sometimes 5. You're technically awake. Your eyes might even be open, but your brain has briefly checked out. This is why falling asleep at the wheel doesn't work the way most people picture, like slowly drifting. It often happens in an instant, a microsleep, and then impact. This is also a good moment to mention something most people don't realize. Sleep isn't one thing. When you sleep, your brain cycles through stages: light sleep, deep sleep, and REM. Each stage does something different and irreplaceable. Deep sleep is when your brain does something almost science fiction sounding. It opens up what researchers call the glymphatic system, a biological cleaning network. Cerebrospinal fluid floods through the spaces between your brain cells and flushes out metabolic waste, toxins, proteins, cellular debris. One of those proteins is called beta amyloid. You might recognize that name. Beta amyloid buildup in the brain is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. Every night of good sleep is in part your brain taking out its own trash, and every night of missed sleep means some of that trash doesn't get cleared. Night after night, year after year, 72. 3 days. This is where things get medically significant. This is where human sleep deprivation studies typically stop, for ethical reasons. Because at 72 hours, people start experiencing hallucinations. Not subtle ones, real ones, visual, auditory, tactile. The phenomenon is called sleep deprivation psychosis, and it produces symptoms nearly indistinguishable from severe mental illness. In controlled studies, participants at the 72-hour mark reported seeing patterns moving in their vision, hearing their name called, misidentifying objects. One famous case involves a 17-year-old named Randy Gardner, who in 1964 stayed awake for 11 days as a science experiment. By day 3, he thought he was a famous football player and mistook a street sign for a person. By day 4, he was having full conversations with people who weren't in the room. And what makes this so haunting is that he knew somewhere underneath it that it wasn't real, and he still couldn't stop it. This tells you something important. Your brain is not a passive recorder of reality. It is an active constructor of reality. When the parts of the brain responsible for reality testing go offline, your brain doesn't go blank. It fills in the gaps, it hallucinates, it invents. Now, here's a question you might be thinking. If sleep deprivation causes hallucinations at 72 hours, what actually happens if someone literally never sleeps again? Not just a few days, forever. There is actually a disease for this. It's real, it's rare, and it's one of the most terrifying things in medical literature. It's called fatal familial insomnia. FFI is a prion disease, a progressive neurological disorder that is, with current medical knowledge, completely incurable and uniformly fatal. It's genetic. And what it does is exactly what the name suggests. It progressively destroys the brain's ability to sleep. Permanently. Here is how it goes. The first stage involves increasing insomnia. Not bad sleep, not choppy sleep, but total, progressive, absolute insomnia. Along with it come panic attacks, strange sweating, and overheating. Heart rate and blood pressure rise. In the second stage, the hallucinations begin. Vivid, terrifying, and constant, because the brain, denied real sleep and denied real dreams, starts dreaming while awake. It has no choice. The dream mechanism doesn't just turn off, it looks for gaps. And when those gaps are every waking moment, it takes them. Stage 3 involves a complete loss of cognitive function. The person can no longer speak coherently or recognize family members. Stage 4, dementia. Complete unresponsiveness. Death. The entire course from first symptom to death is typically between 7 months and 3 years. There are fewer than 200 families in the world known to carry the genetic mutation. I'm not telling you this to be dark. I'm telling you this because FFI is the literal answer to the question of this video. What happens if you never sleep again? That is what happens. The brain, denied sleep at a biological level, doesn't simply get tired. It begins to dissolve itself. It loses the ability to distinguish real from unreal. And then it stops working entirely to sleep. Isn't something your brain does when there's nothing else going on. Sleep is the thing without which your brain stops being a brain. Now let's zoom back out, because most of you aren't dealing with FFI. You're dealing with something much more common, and in its own way, much more insidious, chronic sleep deprivation. The kind that's normalized. The kind that doesn't come from a prion disease, but from a phone that's always on, a brain that won't quiet down, a schedule that treats 8 hours of sleep like a luxury you haven't earned yet. Here's the part I really want you to hear. Chronic mild sleep deprivation, consistently getting 5 or 6 hours instead of 7 or 8, does something specific to how you feel about yourself. Not just to your cognition, not just to your body, to you. The psychological you. When you're chronically underslept, your emotional baseline shifts downward, slowly. So slowly you don't notice it. You start to feel slightly more anxious than you used to, slightly less patient, slightly more overwhelmed by things that used to feel manageable, slightly more detached from things that used to bring you joy. And most people, when they notice this shift, they assume it's them. They assume something is wrong with them. They start wondering if they have depression or anxiety, or if they're just a more difficult, more broken kind of person than they used to be, when sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the answer is much simpler. You're exhausted. And you've been exhausted for so long that exhausted feels normal. There's something else about sleep that most people don't know, and it's kind of beautiful, actually. When you learn something new, your brain doesn't immediately lock it into long-term memory. It holds it temporarily, like RAM in a computer. The process by which information gets transferred from short-term to long-term storage happens almost entirely during sleep. During slow-wave sleep and REM, your brain replays the experiences of the day, consolidates them, connects them to other things you know. This is why pulling an all-nighter before an exam is almost always counterproductive. You might have the information in your RAM, but if you don't sleep, you don't consolidate it. It doesn't transfer. And when you sit down to write the exam running on no sleep with your prefrontal cortex offline, a lot of what you studied just isn't there. But there's a deeper version of this. Emotional memory consolidation also happens during sleep. REM sleep appears to play a specific role in reducing the emotional charge of difficult memories. While you're in REM, your brain replays experiences, including upsetting ones, but does so in a neurochemical environment with significantly lower levels of norepinephrine, the stress chemical. Your brain gets to reprocess difficult experiences in a calmer chemical context. It strips away some of the charge. It leaves the information without as much of the sting. This is why you often feel better about something after sleeping on it. Not because you've thought it through more carefully, because your brain has had a chance to replay the memory without the full hit of the original stress response. When you're chronically sleep deprived, this process doesn't happen efficiently. Difficult experiences don't get properly processed, the charge doesn't get reduced, and over time, you end up carrying more unprocessed emotional weight than a fully rested person doing the same exact life. Let's talk about the part most people really don't want to hear. What bad sleep does to how you see yourself. There's a particular kind of night that a lot of overthinkers know very well. The kind where you don't fall asleep until 2, 3, 4 in the morning, not because you're not tired, but because your brain refuses to let go. You lie there, you replay, you catastrophize. You plan conversations that will never happen with people who have no idea you're awake rehearsing them. And then you wake up too early and spend the whole next day feeling like you're not quite real. Like there's a layer of glass between you and everything. Here's what nobody tells you about that glass feeling. It's not metaphorical, it's neurological. Sleep deprivation literally reduces activity in the part of your brain that processes the present moment. Your brain, when underslept, defaults more heavily to internally focused processing, the default mode network, responsible for rumination and future projection. Not only do you feel disconnected from the present, your brain is actually spending less processing power on the present. The thing you've been calling anxiety, or depression, or just a personality quirk, has a measurable neurological mechanism, and that mechanism is made significantly worse by chronic sleep deprivation. So what do you do with all of this? I want to give you a few things that are less obvious than the standard sleep hygiene list you've already read 17 times. First, stop trying to force sleep and start trying to reduce the stakes of not sleeping. Most people lie there getting increasingly anxious about not sleeping, which makes it even harder to sleep. Research suggests that simply lying quietly with your eyes closed gives your brain significant recovery, not as much as actual sleep, but more than people think. Reframe the goal from, "I have to fall asleep," to, "I just need to rest my brain." You're not failing at sleep. You're trying too hard to pass it. Second, your body temperature matters more than most people realize. To fall asleep, your core body temperature needs to drop. A cool room, a cool shower before bed, a lighter blanket, these aren't just comfort choices. They work with your brain's actual sleep initiation mechanism. So many people are lying in warm rooms wondering why they can't fall asleep. Third, for the overthinkers specifically. Your brain goes into rumination mode at night because the dark quiet of bed is the first moment all day where there's nothing to distract it. The whole day you've been filling every gap, and then you lie down, and your brain, which has been trying to process some stuff all day, finally gets its window. One thing that genuinely helps is what researchers call a cognitive offload. Before bed, write. Not a journal entry necessarily, just a brain dump. Get the open loops out of your head and onto a page. Your brain holds on to things partly because it's afraid you'll forget them. When you write them down, it gets a signal. This has been recorded. You don't have to keep running it. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that's enough to let it go. One important note before we close. Not all sleep problems are the same. Some people have clinical insomnia with a genuine neurological component that needs medical attention. Some have sleep apnea, a condition where they stop breathing dozens or hundreds of times a night without remembering it, that leaves them exhausted no matter how many hours they're in bed. Some are dealing with trauma that makes sleep feel genuinely unsafe at a level that no amount of journaling or cool rooms will touch. If you've tried the basics and they consistently don't work, please talk to someone who can actually help. Some problems are bigger than lifestyle adjustments. Seeking real support isn't giving up. It's doing the right thing. Here's what I want to leave you with. You are not a broken sleeper. You are a human being with a nervous system that is trying very hard to keep you safe. And sometimes, especially for people who feel deeply, who think a lot, who carry more internal weight than other people seem to, that nervous system runs in overdrive every time you dismiss sleep as something for less productive people or push through on 5 hours like it's a badge of honor. You're not being strong. You're running a machine that desperately needs maintenance and telling it that maintenance is for the weak. It isn't your brain clears its waste at night. Your memories get filed and processed at night. Your emotional experiences get decharged at night. Your immune system does its most important work at night. The person you are when you wake up tomorrow is quite literally being built tonight. And if you've spent years in the kind of low-grade exhaustion that starts to feel like your personality, maybe the most interesting experiment you could run on yourself isn't another productivity system or self-improvement routine. Maybe it's just, what would I actually feel like if I wasn't tired? Not tired in the background, not tired as a baseline. What would your brain feel like? What would your emotions feel like? What would the world look like through eyes that had actually been allowed to close? Most people don't know the answer. They've been running so long on empty that they've forgotten what full feels like. There's a version of you that isn't running on fumes. That isn't making its most important decisions with a half-functional prefrontal cortex. And the strange thing? You don't have to do anything dramatic to find that version. You just have to close your eyes and let your brain do what it's been waiting all day to do. If you found this interesting, the next video I want to make is about what happens to your brain during dreams, and why what your brain does while you sleep might actually tell you things about yourself that you've been too awake to notice.